if you think I'm crazy, call the cops." That's exactly what my daughter-in-law said, standing in my living room, holding her phone like it was a weapon. What she didn't know was that I had been recording everything for weeks, and I wasn't about to be pushed out of my own home without a fight. My name is Evelyn Hart. I'm 69 years old, a retired nurse, and a widow for the last 5 years. I spent 3 decades working in emergency rooms, raising a son, paying off a mortgage, and keeping my head above water through some of life's hardest storms. I never thought the real storm would come from inside my own house. I let my son and his wife move in when times got tough, thinking it would be temporary. 7 months later, they were still here, still not paying rent, and suddenly suggesting that I might not be mentally fit to live alone. This isn't a story about a sweet old lady who got scared and backed down. It's about a woman who spent her whole life looking after everyone else and finally decided to look after herself. It's about being underestimated, dismissed, and nearly erased by the people I thought I could trust the most. What happened that day changed everything. Not just for me, but for every senior they thought they could manipulate. Because, while Brittany was dialing 911 and performing her little panic act, I was quietly setting the stage for the truth to come out. This is not just about a fight over space or family drama. This was about control, about money, and about one woman refusing to be treated like a burden in the home she built. So if you're here for a quiet story, I'll warn you now, this one comes with police, a fake doctor, a lawyer with perfect timing, and the FBI. Ready? Let me take you back to how it all started. Eric lost his job right after New Year's. He showed up at my door with Brittany, 2 suitcases, and a shaky smile that reminded me of when he was 10 and broke the neighbor's window with a baseball. He said it was just until he got back on his feet, and Brittany added that they wouldn't be any trouble. At first, I believed them. I made up the guest room, stocked the fridge, and told them to make themselves at home. I didn't realize that was exactly what they do down to the letter. Weeks turned into months, and nothing changed. Eric stopped looking for work after the first rejection email. Brittany claimed she was building an online boutique, but all I saw were boxes of clothes she never wore and delivery drivers knocking on my door twice a day. They didn't offer to pay for groceries, didn't touch the utility bills, and didn't even pick up after themselves. My quiet home started feeling like a dorm room, and somehow I had become the unpaid housekeeper. I cooked, cleaned, and even found myself asking permission to use my own laundry machine. Brittany took over the kitchen. She liked her coffee a specific way and left half-empty cups on every counter. She'd sigh loudly whenever I walked in while she was on the phone, then whisper things like, "She's hovering again," or "I think she forgot she already told that story." I tried to ignore it at first. I told myself they were just stressed, trying to figure things out. But one night, I came home from the pharmacy to find Brittany reorganizing my living room, telling Eric that the furniture needed to feel less grandma. They began talking about my home like it was theirs. Brittany started calling it our space. She even moved my sewing machine out of the den to make room for her vision board and ring light. Eric never said a word. When I finally asked if they had any plans to contribute, or maybe start looking for another place, Brittany gave me a look like I'd insulted her personally. She said they were helping me by being there, that I needed company and shouldn't be alone at my age. The gaslighting was subtle but constant. She told Eric I was starting to forget things, said I repeated myself a lot. One time, when I misplaced the remote, she gave me this pitying smile and said, "Maybe you should write things down more often." But the worst moment came one Saturday morning. When I asked if they could tidy up the guest room, Brittany didn't even look up from her phone. She just said, "Maybe you shouldn't live here at all." My heart dropped, not because I was shocked, but because Eric said nothing. He just kept scrolling through the TV menu, acting like his wife hadn't just tried to evict me from my own home. That was the moment I knew something had shifted. I wasn't just being disrespected. I was being erased. And if I didn't push back soon, I might actually disappear. It started small. Brittany would ask if I'd taken my blood pressure meds that morning, even though I always took them after breakfast. She'd say I told her the same story yesterday, even if I hadn't spoken to her at all that day. Then Eric started chiming in. He said I'd been more forgetful lately, that I had left the front door unlocked, that I'd asked him twice in the same afternoon where the salt was. At first, I brushed it off. I mean, I'm not 25 anymore. Everyone forgets things sometimes. But then came the notebook. I found it on the kitchen counter, open to a page labeled Observations, Mom. It had dates and little bullet points. Forgot the kettle was on. Repeated story from Monday. Asked if I fed the cat. I haven't owned a cat in 10 years. The air in the house changed after that. They started speaking to me more slowly, like I was a child. Brittany began ending every sentence with honey or sweetie. But it wasn't affection. It was condescension wrapped in fake kindness. A week later, Brittany told me someone was coming by to check in. Just a routine wellness visit, she said. I opened the door to a tall man in a blazer, carrying a worn leather briefcase. He introduced himself as Dr. Harlan Scott, said he'd seen me a few months ago for memory concerns. My stomach dropped. I had never seen this man in my life. He asked if we could sit down to talk. I told him no. I asked for identification. Brittany immediately stepped in, saying I didn't need to be so defensive, that it was just a check-in to make sure I was doing okay. Doctor, Scott gave me that same syrupy tone and said that resistance like mine was very common in early-stage cognitive decline. That's when it hit me. This wasn't a concern. This was a strategy, a setup. They weren't waiting for me to slip. They were building a case. And if I didn't act fast, they'd have the world believing I'd already lost my mind. What Brittany and Eric didn't know was that I'd been recording our conversations for weeks. Ever since I caught them whispering in the kitchen one night about guardianship and power of attorney, I'd slipped a tiny recorder into the flower vase by the stove. It picked up everything, from their late-night strategy sessions to Brittany laughing about how easy it would be to make me look unstable. I downloaded the files and listened to them all, twice. My hands shook the whole time. At one point, Brittany joked that once I was in a facility, they could finally renovate the house without my clutter in the way. Eric didn't laugh. But he didn't stop her either. That same night, I emailed the recordings to Monica Keller, my old college roommate and now an estate attorney with a spine of steel. She called me within an hour. Her voice was calm but firm. She said we had enough to build a defense, maybe even press charges if things escalated. And they did. 2 days later, Brittany claimed I'd threatened her during breakfast. She called the police and told them I was having an episode, that she feared for her safety. When the doorbell rang, I didn't panic. I walked calmly to the door, opened it, and saw 2 officers standing on my porch with polite but cautious expressions. One of them asked if everything was okay. I nodded and invited them in. I told them I had something they needed to hear before any assumptions were made. I pulled out the USB drive Monica had labeled Plan A and handed it to the older officer. While they listened in the hallway, Brittany stood behind them, arms crossed, feigning concern. Eric lingered near the stairs, pale and silent. I watched their faces change as the recording played. First confusion, then realization, then something colder. The officer looked at me and said they'd need to make a few calls. I told him to take his time. After all, I wasn't the one who needed to worry. Not anymore. 15 minutes after the officers stepped into my house, Monica Keller pulled up to the curb like a woman on a mission. She didn't knock. She walked straight in, black blazer sharp as her voice. A folder thick with documents in one hand and a printout of Brittany's digital footprint in the other. The temperature in the room shifted instantly. The officers turned to her, unsure of who she was. Monica introduced herself and handed over her credentials before addressing Dr. Harlan Scott with a calmness that could crack glass. She asked him where he earned his license. He said nothing. She asked again, this time louder, adding that according to the state medical board, Dr. Scott hadn't practiced legally in over 4 years. Brittany tried to cut her off, but Monica silenced her with a look. Then she dropped the bombshell. She had Brittany's legal name history, 3 different aliases in the past decade, and 2 former marriages to elderly men who both died under sudden, questionable circumstances. There was a restraining order filed by a former stepdaughter in Arizona. Suddenly, the officers weren't looking at me anymore. They were looking at Brittany. Monica handed over the recordings, transcripts, and a notarized statement outlining how Brittany had slowly tried to establish a pattern of cognitive decline. She detailed the coordinated timing of the so-called wellness visit and how it mirrored cases in other states involving elderly women and fraudulent psychiatric evaluations. Her voice was calm, almost clinical, but her eyes burned with fury. Eric sat down on the couch like someone had pulled the floor from under him. He kept whispering that he didn't know, that he just thought Brittany was helping. Monica didn't even look at him. She focused on the cops, walking them through each step of the plan like she'd done this 100 times. By the time she was done, one of the officers asked Brittany if she had anything to say. She tried to cry. She tried to say it was all a misunderstanding, that she loved me, that she was just concerned for my health, but the recording said otherwise. So did the financial records. Monica had printed out charges on my credit card for spa retreats and luxury items that never reached this house. Then, Monica looked directly at the younger officer and said, "This wasn't just elder abuse. It was part of a larger scam. One she'd seen before in probate courts and fraud cases from New Jersey to California." She suggested they contact federal authorities. The room went quiet, except for the sound of a ticking wall clock and Brittany's shallow breathing. The older officer nodded slowly, then picked up his radio. He requested immediate contact with state fraud investigators and a supervisor on site. For the first time in months, I felt something shift. It was subtle, like pressure lifting off a bruise, but it was real. Monica turned to me, her expression softening for the first time since she walked in. She told me I wasn't alone anymore, that this kind of thing happened more often than people realized, and that Brittany had messed with the wrong woman this time. As they escorted Brittany into another room for questioning, Monica stayed close. She said federal agents would likely be in touch by morning, that this case was bigger than just me, and that I had just lit a fire that would take down more than one name. I didn't say much. I didn't need to. The damage had been done, but not to me. Not this time. 2 weeks after the police visit, I got a call from Monica. She said the FBI had taken an interest in my case and wanted to talk. Not just about Brittany, but about a whole network of similar scams targeting seniors across the country. They needed someone to help expose the pattern from the inside. I said yes before she even finished the sentence. I wasn't scared. I was focused. They set me up with a cover story, a fake portfolio, and a burner phone. My name was now Evelyn Morris, a recently widowed woman sitting on a modest inheritance and confused about how to protect it. It wasn't far from the truth, which made it even easier to play. A week later, I met Gerald Mackey at a quiet cafe off Route 18. He looked polished, charming, mid-50s, with perfect teeth, and a voice that could sell sand in the desert. He said he specialized in helping older clients avoid estate taxes and simplify their assets before things got messy with probate or hospitals. He never mentioned the word scam. Not once. He spoke like a friend of the family, used terms like asset preservation and legacy security. He pulled out charts, brochures, and fake testimonials. His pitch was airtight. Even I almost believed him, and I knew better. He said the best next step would be for me to sign over a temporary power of attorney to a trusted third-party firm. Just until we moved everything into something safer, I nodded, kept my smile soft, and asked all the questions the FBI told me to. I recorded every word, with a mic stitched into my sleeve. I made sure to lean into the role just enough to make him feel like he had me right where he wanted. But inside, I was tracking every detail. The meeting ended with a handshake and a promise to send documents for signature. I walked out with my heart steady and my purpose clear. The ghost they thought they could swindle had just become the hunter. The next meeting was set in a private room at a downtown notary's office. I wore a pale blue cardigan, kept my voice soft, and carried a small purse with nothing but a pen and a hard candy. Gerald arrived 10 minutes late, all smiles and charm, holding the final documents he said would protect my estate from greedy hospitals and probate vultures. He walked me through every page like he was doing me a favor. The power of attorney clause was buried in the fine print, disguised as a convenience. I nodded like I didn't notice, like I was just grateful someone was looking out for me. The FBI agent sat just 2 rooms away, watching the feed through hidden cameras. When I signed the last page, my hand didn't shake. I clicked the pen, looked up at him, and said thank you in a way that probably made his skin crawl in hindsight. As soon as he left the building, 2 agents followed. I stepped into the hallway and saw him being cuffed just as he reached his car. He didn't look confused, he looked angry. One of the agents later told me Gerald had been on their radar for years. His operation had touched 12 states, stolen millions, and silenced dozens of victims. But not this time. Not with me. They said the recordings, the signed forms, the video, every piece of it was the nail they needed to shut the whole thing down. I wasn't just bait. I was the closer. Monica called me that night, laughing through tears. She said I had done what entire teams couldn't pull off in court. I didn't feel like a hero. I felt like myself again. After months of being told I was losing it, I had never seen things more clearly. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't the one being watched. I was the one watching them fall. Eric came to me a week after the arrest. He stood in the kitchen like a boy again, eyes down, hands folded, and finally said what I'd waited so long to hear. He told me he was sorry for the silence, for the blindness, for forgetting that I was still his mother. He moved out the following weekend. No drama, no promises, just a quiet hug and a box of clothes. I told him we'd be okay, that healing wasn't always loud. Sometimes it started with a door closing gently behind you. Since then, I've been working with Monica on something new. A foundation. A network. A space where older adults can learn how to protect themselves, spot red flags, and speak up before it's too late. It won't erase what happened, but it might stop it from happening again to someone else. I know now that being older doesn't mean being helpless. It means being seasoned, strategic, and maybe, finally, a little dangerous in the right way. I may be 69, but I'm nobody's victim, and I never will be.